What better one than one that was pretty anticipated by a lot of MCU fans? Uh, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Very interesting film, to say the least. Coming out of this, I wasn't really all that interested or excited in this film, to be honest, or the MCU as a whole. I've kind of made that clear since Avengers Endgame that I just really haven't been all that enthralled with, what the MCU's been doing. So, going into this, I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations or excitement. And leaving the film, I don't know. I thought it was kind of all right. Let's get into the non-spoiler thoughts here. And this is the non-spoiler review, so if you have not seen the film, stick around and hear what I got to say if you care. And if not, go check out the film. But these are non-spoiler thoughts. I kind of already let it off the bat. And I didn't love this film, if I'm being honest. I thought it was okay. There was good moments, but overall, kind of a lot of what I expected. There was some things I didn't expect, but overall, I kind of left the film a little bit lukewarm with it. If that makes sense. Given my last review of The Northman, I was very excited and really enjoyed that film. And its originality, but this one obviously is a franchise film. It has 20 plus films and now TV series that you have to watch to kind of get the context behind it. And that's kind of my thing at this point in the MCU is like, there's just so much baggage that comes with these films that it just feels like these filmmakers can't really be free. It feels like they're within the confines of the film they're trying to make, and with that, the baggage that comes with it. It feels like they're trapped within the confines of the baggage of the MCU. This film was written by Michael Waldron and directed by the great Sam Raimi. And that was my thing that really made me excited about this film. The one thing that really made me excited was Sam Raimi was directing this. And I'm a big Sam Raimi fan. I love a lot of his films, including the Spider-Man trilogy, the Evil Dead movies, the Quick and the Dead, I think it's what it's called. His Western he made, I think it's called, The Quick and the Dead, with Sharon Stone and Gene Hackman. I saw that on TV one day. I watched like half of it. I needed to go back and actually watch the whole film, but I remember thinking that was really a cool Western. So throughout the years, man, Sam Raimi has just kind of really made some crazy films. He's great with horror. He's great with practical effects. And it was interesting to see a film like this be made because, a lot of people, when this was announced, a lot of people kind of felt like and knew that this was going to have like a horror spin on it. But with it being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like how much horror was this really going to have was kind of the question going into it. And there is some horror elements in this film without spoiling it, but it just felt to me like Sam Raimi's hands were tied in this film. It didn't feel like this was entirely the film he wanted to make, and it didn't entirely feel like a Sam Raimi film at times. And that's kind of my problem with the MCU as a whole, is that a lot of these films just kind of blend together. They don't feel like they're very different. Outside of like James Gunn's films, the Guardians of the Galaxy films, I would say those are probably like the most unique, and they're probably some of the better ones, especially that original Guardians of the Galaxy is still a really fun movie, and I really enjoyed it when I first saw it. And this film I wasn't really all that excited going in, like I said. And my expectations were kind of exactly where I kind of ended up when the film was over, to be honest. The MCU to me just doesn't really excite me at this point. Like, it feels like everything right now is just an afterthought. And on top of that, with it being called the Multiverse of Madness, they really try to dive deep and explain the multiverse. And I've never really been on board with the multiverse concept. I just think it's just too much, it's just a lot. And, it just, to me, feels like it's just a way for them to be able to shove in all the IP that Disney spent $74 billion buying, all of that Fox intellectual property, that being, all of the films that Fox made. They basically purchased the rights to, and now they have a big batch of characters that they have to essentially, reboot and bring into the MCU this late in the game, when to me it seems like it's already over, with Endgame, with the snap and all that stuff. Like, it just feels like this story's already been told, and everything that's kind of coming afterwards, I'm struggling to really care about. And a lot of these characters, I'm struggling to really care about. Doctor Strange was one, though, that I really was excited and interested in, though. Given the first film, which I really enjoyed a lot, the first Doctor Strange film, I thought it was really interesting. The visual effects were great, and I even thought the story was pretty okay. But this film, it just doesn't feel like a direct sequel to that, because there's just so much that's happened in the MCU since that Doctor Strange film. It just feels like, all this film and that film don't really go together the same way that like the Thor films do, or the Captain America films do, or the Iron Man films do, where you could just watch all of those back to back to back and really have a whole story that plays out. This film just kind of doesn't feel anything like the first Doctor Strange film. I mean, outside of a lot of the same characters being involved, it doesn't really take any of them in any place in particular. It tries too much to build on the lore of the multiverse, and I'll get into that kind of when we talk about spoilers, but just sticking in the non-spoiler territory, a lot of the new characters that are introduced, I wasn't really that interested in this film, to be honest with you. There just wasn't really anything that in this movie that made me all that excited about the MCU. And for me, I just don't know how much legs the MCU is going to have going forward, honestly. I've been watching Moon Knight. I haven't really been all that impressed with that. Like I said, I watched Wanda Vision. I thought it was interesting up until about the 5th episode, and then after that, I was kind of out on that, and I'll explain, obviously, because Wanda is in this film. I'll explain kind of why I think that show is even more unnecessary than it was at the time it came out. That's all I'll say on that, but wasn't really that excited about Wanda Vision. Like I said, Falcon and Winter Soldier was just cringy and bland. Loki, I thought, was the worst of the bunch. I thought that show was terrible, and what was an exciting character with a great cliffhanger in Endgame for that character, they just literally kicked him in the balls for the entire series. Was not loving Loki either. I didn't even watch Hawkeye. I had no time and didn't really care to. So yeah, I've just kind of been out on the MCU shows, and even some of the films. I haven't even seen Eternals yet. I still have not seen that one. So yeah, I've just the point is, I've just been struggling to care, and at this point, because it just feels like everything is an afterthought to, the original series, the Infinity Wars, and it sucks also that they in Loki and even in this film in some ways kind of dump on the original films as if they don't really matter anymore. They take away the free will of these characters. In Loki, you find out that the time cops kind of take away the free will of people in these universes, and with that kind of it was annoying, because it's like, okay, well, everything that happened was just supposed to happen because the time cops said it was, and that kind of stuff was just really frustrating. The stuff that they've done with this new phase of the MCU, and with this film, it just didn't take it in any direction that really warrants me to want to jump up and see the next film. I mean, I'll definitely go see Thor 4 just because I really liked Ragnarok. I thought it was really funny and silly, even though, yeah, I don't think Ragnarok holds up as well as when I saw it in theaters. It is very silly and kind of dumps on the Thor character, but at least it was really entertaining and had some good humor, unlike this film, which the jokes in this film do not land whatsoever. I was not a fan of any of the humor in here at all. It just wasn't funny. It wasn't, so a lot of it just falls flat, in my opinion. And yeah, there was just a lot of like really cringy moments in this film too, but it wasn't all that bad. And to be honest, it could have been a lot worse. And I'm kind of dumping on the film, but it does have some good effects, some good sequences, some good action. I love a lot of the Doctor Strange powers and, kind of how that all works within, visually with the CGI and the way things kind of like break down and flip around and all that. If you see these movies, you know what I'm talking about. But like Doctor Strange's powers are really visually interesting to watch, and watching them kind of go through the multiverse and go into these different universes is visually stimulating. Like, this is a very visually stimulating film, but it's not a very mentally stimulating film. I do think the story of this film works, but the character development doesn't really exist, and the characters that they introduce are not very interesting. And like I said, the characters that already existed, they don't really do a whole bunch with. So yeah, I didn't love this film, to be honest. I'm not really that excited about the MCU moving forward. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many more years they're going to be able to do this. I mean, and that's the thing, like you can't just bank on cameos and fan service forever. People want something new at the end of the day, or they want something old but flipped on its head, but this film just, yeah, I just wasn't really that enthralled with what was going on, if I'm being honest. But again, I do think there is good here, but overall, I don't know, I wasn't all that excited or when I left the theater, I just was kind of like, all right, like, and I think with some of the series and things like that, I gave it kind of the benefit of the doubt, just because I was like, okay, well, they're going to do something with this. They're going to do something with this. And it just doesn't seem like they are, outside of just like, oh, we need to introduce this character because we bought the rights. We need to introduce these characters because we bought the rights. We need to do this for this reason. We need to do this for this reason. And it just doesn't feel like anything is natural anymore in the MCU. Everything feels like it's contrived for some sort of purpose, whether it's for a message or because they spent billions of dollars on intellectual property that they have to introduce to get an ROI. It doesn't feel natural the way that the original MCU did. Those original films, where they were just trying to build these characters up and really give you a different feel with each film. Like, it just feels like now they're just trying to string it along because they have something going here. And it doesn't really feel like there's a whole lot of, originality. It doesn't feel like they even let these filmmakers really be filmmakers. It just feels like, they just stuck Sam Raimi in here and said, hey, we'll, do what you can, but do it within the confines of what we've created. And that's kind of my problem with the MCU at this point. It's just so dense to the point where it's like, and that they have to literally just, they have to keep it within the box that they've created. And with that, with a director like Sam Raimi, it's hard because he thinks so far outside of the box that, like, yeah, I don't know, but that it just doesn't seem like he can really be creative. And that's probably one of my biggest complaints with the film, is it doesn't, like I said earlier, it just feels like Sam Raimi's hands were tied with this. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I've got to say on the non-spoiler side. Yeah, I didn't love this film. I thought it was okay. A little bit less than okay, to be honest with you. I thought it was pretty blah. I actually thought Shang-Chi was probably better than this, even though I didn't review that. I probably think that movie is better than this. Obviously, Spider-Man. And like I said, that's why a lot of people, I think, went to go see this, just because Doctor Strange was in Spider-Man, and people are riding off the high of that. I mean, that kind of did help reinvigorate a lot of people in the MCU, because the MCU was really starting to lose steam after, Wanda Vision, Falcon, Winter Soldier, Loki, like those films. I mean, those shows and Eternals didn't do that well, and I didn't even see that one, but I heard it wasn't great. And then Shang-Chi, which did okay, and I thought the film was all right. I thought it was better than this. But I was really the most excited for Shang-Chi. I was like, this looks really fun, and it ended up being It ended up being all right. But this one just wasn't really that into it, honestly. But yeah, that's all I got non spoiler wise.